You know, I would rather not be talking about, frankly, particularly 2 days before Christmas, because the Church of England has had, shall we say, a bit of a turbulent year, full of turbulent priests. The Archbishop of Canterbury had to offer his resignation not that long ago over a safeguarding scandal, while the second most important Archbishop in the country, the Archbishop of York, Stephen Cottrell, he is now facing calls for his resignation. And it's slightly ironic because over the next few months, he will be replacing the Archbishop of Canterbury in some of his official duties. And yet he's caught up in another scandal where it is alleged that he didn't deal with a dean in Essex when he was Bishop of Chelmsford, a man called David Tudor. He allowed him to stay in his post for 9 years, despite knowing that he had been accused of all sorts of different things. He has actually served a prison sentence. And his justification for not taking action was that he couldn't due to church rules. Now, I find that quite inexplicable, because if you know that someone is a danger to women and girls, why on earth would you not move heaven and earth to make sure that they had no opportunity to repeat some of the things that they were known to have done in the past? Well, Stephen Cottrell, the Archbishop of York, has issued, I'm afraid, I think, an utterly ridiculous statement, which makes his position even worse. He says, "The situation I faced when I became Bishop of Chelmsford was horrible and intolerable. What, for you or for the victims of David Tudor?" He says, "Most of all for the survivors," well, that's nice, "and victims who had bravely come forward and shared their stories from the 1980s. He said, "This morning's news coverage," and this statement was issued last week, "incorrectly implies that no action was taken until 2024. No, it doesn't, because no action was taken until he was then questioned by police in 2019. I don't understand what it is about senior people in the Church of England who don't understand what they've done wrong and why procedures need to change. Now, the Bishop of Newcastle, she seems to be the only bishop in the Church of England who has the bravery to speak out. She has called for the Archbishop of York to resign. And I wonder whether you agree with her. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. Now, let's talk to David Greenwood, who's a solicitor, campaigner and executive member of Minister and Clergy Sexual Abuse Survivors, called MAXAS, who joins me on the line now. David, very good morning. How serious a position is the Archbishop of York in?
I don't think it could be much worse, Ian. Mr. Welby had to resign over a scandal in which he failed to take action against a person who he knew had been beating boys. This is a situation where a chaplain to a school and a parish priest had been sexually assaulting and having sex with underage girls in the 1980s. He was tried twice, convicted against 3 girls, and then acquitted against 1. Served a prison sentence, and then was rehabilitated into the priesthood. In 2005, an MP called for his resignation. So Stephen Cottrell must, when he inherited the post at Chelmsford, have had a file a couple of inches thick on this person. And his safeguarding team should have said, look, this is a person that you need to do something about. Yet he did nothing.
Let me just read you a quote from a spokesman for the Archbishop. He said he accepts responsibility for David Tudor remaining as area dean. Well, that on its own, to my mind, should lead to his resignation. This spokesman then goes on, no one advised him that David Tudor should not continue as an area dean. Now, I don't know about you, David, but if I was the Bishop of Chelmsford and I knew that this guy had all of this sort of very bad record, I wouldn't need to take any advice as to whether he should continue as an area dean. I would move heaven and earth to make sure that he didn't. Why
You're right,
why
Ian.
didn't Stephen Cottrell do that? I mean, he says, "Oh well, the church rules wouldn't let me." I mean, seriously?
You are right, Ian. He could have done that. I've looked back. I deal with something called the clergy discipline measure quite often because these situations arise for me at lower levels, down from bishops, fairly often. So on behalf of clients, I complain about bad decision-making and safeguarding. And looking through it again, essentially bishops have complete power over their office holders. They're not employees, they're office holders of these priests. And he could have just dismissed him on the spot if he'd wanted to.
So there wouldn't have been any prospect of an employment tribunal or anything if he'd done that?
Absolutely not, no.
Because that seems to be another thing that he's said somewhere, that, oh, well, I wasn't allowed to, and there have been cases in the past of people taking the church to court.
Oh, I suppose they could try that, and they may or may not succeed on other grounds, but it's not an employment tribunal situation. These are office holders. They're not employees.
When somebody is a dean of an area, I mean, it's obviously more senior than a vicar. What is a dean?
It's a representative of the cathedral that does work in various parishes around that area. It's sort of an assistant dean. The dean is the head of the cathedral. It's sort of an assistant dean.
So it's the sort of person who would be expected to represent the church in local communities, maybe go to visit schools. But we know that David Tudor was banned from visiting schools. So you allow a man who was banned from visiting schools to be an assistant dean. I mean, what kind of organisation allows that?
Exactly. It couldn't be worse, Ian. It couldn't be worse. He had unfettered access to children. And I read the report last night, which showed a picture of this Mr. Tudor holding up his certificate of being appointed area dean, signed by Stephen Cottrell. It's utterly shocking. It just explains everything that's wrong with the church safeguarding. The church seems to put its reputation before the safety of children.
What's your prediction? Gone before Christmas?
I was thinking, before I saw that photograph last night, I was thinking, well, he'll ride it out over Christmas because it's an important time, and then he'll go in the new year. But he cannot stay in his post after all these revelations.
David, thank you. That's David Greenwood from the campaigning organisation MAXAS, Minister and Clergy Sexual Abuse Survivors. Stephen in East Grinstead says, no, you're not going to get me on this. He says, I can't say it because then I'll say I've broken my word. He says, good. Well, he doesn't say good morning, but that's what he means. Maybe they thought protecting the faith was more important than protecting the flock. Well, that, I think, is probably a very good analysis of the situation. But how, as a Christian, as a leading Christian, how can you come to that conclusion? The Reverend Peter Old joins me, Church of England priest and conservative Christian commentator. Peter, very good morning to you.